Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. You know that moment when someone's casual cruelty reveals exactly how they see you? When their throwaway comment strips away years of carefully maintained illusions. That happened to me on a Tuesday evening that changed everything, though it took me months to fully understand what I'd heard. Miranda was hosting her monthly dinner for what she called her powerhouse women, 6 successful professionals who gathered to celebrate their independence and mock traditional gender roles. I'd been making dinner for 8 people, as usual, because Miranda worked late and these gatherings were important for her networking. Software architect salary has its benefits, and I genuinely enjoyed cooking for her friends. The conversation had been typical throughout dinner. Work achievements, travel plans, dismissive comments about husbands who couldn't function without constant management. I was clearing the main course when the topic shifted to our mutual friend Sarah's divorce. I honestly don't understand how Sarah put up with my controlling everything for so long, said Rebecca, a corporate lawyer who specialized in hostile takeovers. The financial control, the social isolation, making her ask permission for basic purchases. It's textbook emotional abuse. Some people are just natural caregivers, though, Miranda replied, gesturing toward me with her wine glass as I brought out the dessert I'd spent 2 hours preparing. Look at me with James. He's nothing without me, really. Just a child who happens to be good with computers. The table went quiet for a moment. I continued serving the chocolate souffle, keeping my expression neutral, but something cold settled in my chest. Without me managing his life, Miranda continued, emboldened by the wine and her audience, he'd probably forget to pay rent and live on takeout forever. Honestly, I don't know how he survived before we met. His mother did everything. Then I took over the role. Jennifer, the marketing executive, glanced at me with what looked like pity. But James seems pretty capable. Doesn't he handle all the tech stuff for your business website? Oh, he's brilliant at work, apparently, Miranda laughed. But completely helpless at actual life. I have to schedule his dentist appointments, remind him to buy groceries, lay out his clothes for important meetings. It's like having a very tall, very expensive child. The women laughed, but it sounded forced. Even in their wine-enhanced state, several looked uncomfortable. I finished serving dessert and retreated to the kitchen, but I could still hear every word. The poor thing would be lost without you, said someone. Completely, Miranda agreed. Sometimes I joke that he'd starve to death in a beautiful apartment because he forgot food was necessary. I stood in our kitchen, the kitchen where I cooked elaborate meals 3 times a week, managed a complex grocery budget, and had spent that very afternoon preparing a souffle that required precise timing and temperature control, listening to my wife explain how incompetent I was to a room full of women who earned less than half my salary. For the first time in our 3-year marriage, I really heard what she was saying. Not just the words, but the casual confidence behind them. She genuinely believed I was helpless. More than that, she enjoyed believing it. The women left around 10, each one giving me polite thanks for dinner while carefully avoiding eye contact. After the door closed, Miranda started her usual post-party cleanup routine, chattering about how well the evening had gone. Rebecca loved your souffle, she said, loading the dishwasher. Though she did seem surprised when I told her you made it. I think she assumed I was the cook in the family. I watched her moving around our kitchen with the confidence of someone who believed she was managing the household, despite the fact that I'd planned the menu, bought the groceries, and prepared everything while she was at work. Miranda, I said quietly, do you really think I'm helpless? She looked up from rinsing wine glasses, seeming genuinely surprised by the question. What do you mean? Tonight, you told your friends I'd starve without you managing my life. Oh, that. She waved a hand dismissively. That was just girl talk. You know how it is, we were talking about men in general. But do you believe it? Do you think I'm incapable of basic adult tasks? She set down the glass and studied my face, apparently trying to determine whether this was a serious conversation or just post-party sensitivity. James, you're incredibly smart about technical things. But practical life stuff? Come on. When's the last time you made a doctor's appointment without me reminding you? Or bought groceries without a detailed list? Or handled any of our bills? I stared at her, processing this. You told me you preferred to handle the bills because you were better with money management. I'm better with money management. That's my point. And the grocery lists. You always forget something important if I don't write everything down. The doctor's appointments? You hate making phone calls to schedule things. She said all of this with the patient tone of someone explaining obvious facts to a slow child. Each answer was technically true, but missed a crucial point. I'd never been given the chance to handle these things because she'd insisted on managing them from the beginning of our relationship. What if I wanted to try managing some of these things myself? Miranda laughed, not unkindly, but with the indulgent amusement of someone humoring an unrealistic request. James, honey, you work 60 hours a week on complex projects. The last thing you need is the stress of trying to juggle household management too. That's what I'm here for. She kissed my forehead and went upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the sudden, uncomfortable realization that my wife saw me as fundamentally incompetent at life. I spent that night lying awake, replaying 3 years of interactions through this new lens. How many times had she helped me by taking over tasks I could have handled myself? How many times had I gratefully accepted her management, interpreting it as love rather than control? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my doctor's office and scheduled my own annual physical. It took 3 minutes. Then I drove to the grocery store without a list and bought ingredients for a week's worth of meals, including several dishes I'd never attempted before. I didn't forget anything important. That afternoon, I sat in my home office and opened our joint bank accounts online for the first time in 2 years. What I found made my chest tight with something between anger and disbelief. My direct deposit went into our joint checking account, $11,500 per month after taxes. Miranda's part-time marketing work contributed about $2,800 monthly. From our joint account, she transferred my full salary minus $500 to savings and investment accounts that only had her name on them. I scrolled through months of statements. My $500 monthly allowance barely covered gas, lunch, and the occasional personal purchase. Meanwhile, Miranda had been building substantial personal savings using my income, all while telling me, and everyone else, that she was managing our finances because I was too incompetent to handle money. I opened another browser tab and began researching financial advisors. 3 days later, I sat across from David Chun, a certified financial planner who specialized in helping high earners optimize their savings and investments. Let me make sure I understand, David said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. You earn $140,000 annually, but you only have discretionary access to $6,000 per year. My wife handles our finances. She says I'm not good with practical money management. David looked at me with the expression of someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. Mr. Williams, you just spent 20 minutes explaining the financial projections for your software architecture project, including risk assessment and ROI calculations. I'm fairly confident you can handle a household budget. The meeting lasted 2 hours. David showed me investment strategies I'd been prevented from implementing, retirement planning I wasn't participating in, and tax advantages I'd never heard of. By the time I left his office, I had a clear picture of how much my incompetence with money had been costing us, and how much control I'd unknowingly surrendered. That evening, Miranda came home excited about a promotion opportunity at her company. It would mean more travel, longer hours, but significantly better pay, she said, settling onto the couch with a glass of wine. The only downside is you'd have to handle more of the household stuff while I'm gone. She said this with the fond concern of someone worried about leaving a teenager home alone for the weekend. I think I could manage, I said carefully. I know you'd try, but it's a lot of coordination. Bills, maintenance issues, social planning. Maybe I should hire someone to help while I'm traveling. Miranda, I coordinated the implementation of a multi-million-dollar software system across 4 international offices last year. That's completely different. That's work stuff. How is it different? She looked at me like I'd asked why water was wet. Personal life management requires different skills. You're brilliant at technical problems, but this is about juggling multiple priorities, keeping track of deadlines, maintaining relationships with service providers. I listened to her describe skills that were identical to what I did professionally every day, except she genuinely believed I was incapable of applying them to my personal life. What if I wanted to try handling our finances for a month, just as an experiment? Miranda laughed, the same indulgent sound from the night of her dinner party. James, sweetie, our financial situation is complicated. We have multiple accounts, investment schedules, automatic transfers. If something got missed or set up incorrectly, it could mess up our credit or cost us hundreds in fees. So you don't trust me to handle money. I trust you to be brilliant at what you're good at. Money management just isn't one of those things. That weekend, I received an email that changed everything. A headhunter had contacted me about a senior architect position with a Dublin-based fintech company. 6-month initial contract, with strong possibility of permanent placement. 40% salary increase, plus housing allowance and relocation assistance. The position could transition to remote work after the initial on-site period. I'd always been interested in international experience, but Miranda had dismissed the idea whenever I'd mentioned it. Too complicated, she'd say. Too much uncertainty. What would I do with my career? How would we handle the logistics? Now, staring at this opportunity, I realized those weren't collaborative concerns about our shared future. They were objections based on her belief that I couldn't handle major life changes without her management. I called the headhunter back. The interview process took 2 weeks. Video calls with the technical team, discussions about visa requirements, detailed conversations about the project timeline. Every interaction reinforced how much my professional colleagues respected my judgment and capabilities. On a Friday afternoon, they offered me the position. I spent the weekend researching Dublin, international banking, and temporary housing options. By Sunday evening, I had a comprehensive plan for the transition, including financial arrangements that would demonstrate exactly how helpless I actually was. Monday morning, I opened individual bank accounts and began the process of redirecting my direct deposit. I calculated our genuine shared expenses, mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, and set up automatic transfers to cover exactly those costs. Everything else would follow me to Dublin. Tuesday evening, I told Miranda about the job offer. Dublin. She looked at me like I'd announced plans to join the circus. James, that's ridiculous. You can't just move to another country. What about our life here? What about our social commitments? What about practical things like visas and housing and banking? I've handled all of that. The company is sponsoring my work visa, they've arranged temporary housing, and I've set up international banking. Miranda stared at me for a long moment. You've handled all of that? When? How? Over the past week. It's actually not that complicated when you break it down into steps. But what about us? What about our relationship? You can't just make a unilateral decision like this. I sat down across from her at our kitchen table. Miranda, you've spent 3 years telling me I'm incapable of handling adult responsibilities. This seems like a good opportunity to test that theory. This isn't about proving anything. This is about being realistic. You've never lived independently, never managed a household alone, never dealt with international bureaucracy. You'd be completely overwhelmed. Maybe, or maybe I'd discover I'm more capable than you've given me credit for. She leaned forward with the expression of someone trying to talk a child out of touching a hot stove. James, I love that you're feeling confident, but moving internationally alone is incredibly complex. There are 1,000 things that could go wrong, and you wouldn't have me there to help figure them out. What if I succeed? What do you mean? What if I move to Dublin, handle all the practical arrangements, excel at the job, and prove that I can function independently? Miranda was quiet for a moment, clearly trying to formulate a response that wouldn't sound as condescending as her instinctive reaction. If that happened, I'd be proud of you. But James, we're talking about real life, not a motivational movie. You don't have experience with this kind of independence. Neither did you before you started living independently. That's different. I've always been self-sufficient. You've been using my income to fund savings accounts in your name while giving me an allowance smaller than what you spend on clothes each month. How is that self-sufficient? The question hung in the air between us. For the first time in our conversation, Miranda looked genuinely uncomfortable. That's not. I manage our finances because I'm good at it. Because it makes sense for our household efficiency. Our household efficiency, or your sense of control? She stood up abruptly, moving to the window with her back to me. I can't believe you're talking about our marriage like this. Like I'm some kind of controlling villain instead of your partner who's been taking care of practical things so you can focus on your career. Miranda, turn around and look at me. She did, and I could see something in her expression I'd never noticed before, fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing her role as the competent one in our relationship. I've accepted the position in Dublin. I leave in 3 weeks. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. And I want you to think about something while I'm gone. You've convinced yourself that I need your management to survive, but you've never actually tested whether that's true or just convenient for you to believe. Convenient? James, managing your life isn't convenient. It's work. It's constant attention to details you don't notice or appreciate. Then you'll be relieved not to have that burden for 6 months. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and increasingly desperate conversations. Miranda alternated between anger at my selfishness and anxiety about my inevitable failure. She made lists of everything I'd need to remember, contacted the Dublin company to verify they understood how much support I'd require, and repeatedly reminded me that it wasn't too late to change my mind. Her friends shared her concerns. I overheard phone conversations where she described my plan as a midlife crisis and predicted I'd be calling within a month, begging her to rescue me from whatever chaos I'd created. The night before my departure, Miranda made one final attempt to demonstrate my dependence on her management. James, I need you to understand how much you're asking of me by leaving like this. Who's going to handle the mortgage payments while you're gone? The utilities? The insurance policies? The maintenance issues? You're abandoning all the adult responsibilities. I handed her a folder containing detailed financial arrangements I'd spent weeks preparing. The mortgage payment is $3,200 monthly, automatically deducted from the joint account on the 15th. Utilities average $400, also automatic. Insurance premiums are quarterly. Here's a schedule of all upcoming maintenance. HVAC service in September, lawn care contract through November. Everything's documented with contact information and account numbers. Miranda opened the folder, scanning pages of meticulous organization. This is very thorough. I've also arranged for my salary to be split. Essential household expenses will continue depositing to our joint account. My personal income will follow me to Dublin. What do you mean split? I mean you'll receive exactly enough to cover the expenses you've been managing with my income. The rest supports me internationally. She looked up from the papers with dawning understanding. How much will be coming to the joint account? Enough to cover the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and a reasonable grocery budget. About $4,800 monthly. That's not enough for everything. What about entertainment, dining out, my personal expenses, savings? You'll need to cover those with your own income, just like every other independent adult. Miranda stared at me, and I watched the mathematical reality of independence settle into her consciousness. Her part-time salary was $2,800 monthly. Without access to my full paycheck, she'd be living within her actual means for the first time in our relationship. You can't just cut off my access to money we've been sharing for 3 years. I'm not cutting off your access. I'm giving you complete control over household management, just like you wanted. You'll have full responsibility for budgeting, planning, and making everything work. That's not how marriage works, James. You can't just abandon your financial obligations to prove some point about independence. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm letting you demonstrate the competence you've always claimed to have. The conversation continued past midnight, but the fundamental reality was unchanged. I was leaving for Dublin in the morning, and Miranda would be managing her life with her own resources while I managed mine with mine. Dublin exceeded every expectation I'd never allowed myself to have. The company had arranged a furnished apartment in Temple Bar, walking distance from the office and surrounded by restaurants, bookshops, and cultural venues I could explore independently. The work was challenging and rewarding, with colleagues who treated me as a competent professional rather than someone requiring constant supervision. More importantly, I discovered that every task Miranda had convinced me I couldn't handle was actually straightforward when approached systematically. Opening an Irish bank account took 1 morning. Learning the public transportation system took a week. Finding grocery stores, restaurants, and services took normal adult problem-solving skills. Within a month, I had established routines, developed preferences, and made social connections with people who had no preconceptions about my capabilities. The work itself was invigorating. Leading a team of international developers, coordinating with clients across multiple time zones, and implementing complex systems architecture, all while navigating a new culture and country. Every day reinforced how much I was capable of handling when I wasn't constantly told I needed help. I video called Miranda weekly, and the contrast between my expanding life and her shrinking one became more apparent with each conversation. "How are things going with the household management?" I asked during our third weekly call. "Fine," she said, but I could hear strain in her voice. "A few adjustments, but I'm handling everything." "Any particular challenges?" "The lawn care was more expensive than expected, and the grocery budget is tighter than I realized. But it's temporary, right? This whole arrangement is just for the 6 months? We'll see how things develop. How's work going for you?" "Actually, I've had to increase my hours. The bills require more income than my part-time schedule was providing." By our 6th weekly call, Miranda's situation had deteriorated significantly. "I need to discuss our financial arrangement," she said without preamble. "The current system isn't sustainable." "What's the problem?" "The problem is that you've set up a budget that doesn't account for normal life expenses. Social activities, clothing, emergency repairs, savings for retirement. There's no cushion for anything beyond basic survival." "How are other people managing those expenses?" "Other people don't have our lifestyle standards. Other people don't have our social obligations." I was sitting in a Dublin cafe where I'd just finished an excellent dinner with colleagues, having spent the afternoon exploring Trinity College's library and the evening enjoying traditional music at a local pub. My life had never been richer or more satisfying. "Miranda, you're describing the reality of living within your own income. It's what most adults do. Most adults don't have partners who abandon them to prove philosophical points about independence. I haven't abandoned you. I've given you the opportunity to demonstrate all the competence you've always claimed to have. This isn't about competence. This is about you punishing me for caring enough to manage practical things you didn't want to handle yourself. Is that really what you think? That you were doing me a favor by controlling every aspect of our shared life?" The call ended with Miranda hanging up, but not before I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before: doubt about her own narrative. 3 months into my Dublin experience, I received a different kind of call. "James, I need you to come home. There's been an emergency." My heart rate spiked immediately. "What kind of emergency? Are you hurt? Is someone in the hospital?" I'm fine physically, but I can't do this anymore. The house, the finances, managing everything alone. I need help." "What specifically is wrong?" "Everything. The mortgage payment was late because I miscalculated when my paycheck would clear. The air conditioning broke, and I don't know how to coordinate repair estimates. I've been eating takeout for weeks because grocery planning is more complicated than I realized." I listened to her describe a series of problems that represented normal adult life management, the kind of coordination and decision-making that millions of people handle independently every day. "Miranda, these sound like learning opportunities, not emergencies." "Learning opportunities?" "James, I'm barely keeping everything together. I haven't been social in months because I can't afford the restaurants our friends prefer. I'm working full-time for the first time in years, and I'm exhausted. This isn't sustainable. What would you like me to do?" "Come home. Resume our normal financial arrangement. We can discuss the Dublin thing as a vacation, but this experiment needs to end." I was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window of my Dublin apartment at the city I'd learned to navigate independently, thinking about the life I'd built through competence Miranda had insisted I didn't possess. "I'm not coming home, Miranda." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm extending my stay in Dublin. The company has offered me a permanent position with remote work flexibility. I'm going to accept it." "You can't be serious. You're going to end our marriage over this?" "I'm not ending anything. I'm choosing to continue living as a competent adult rather than returning to being treated like a dependent child. That's not what our marriage was like. Miranda, you told a room full of people that I was nothing without you, that I was just a child who needed constant management. You genuinely believed I'd fail at basic adult tasks because you'd never seen me succeed at them, mostly because you'd never allowed me to try. So you're going to throw away 3 years of marriage to prove a point? I'm going to honor 3 years of marriage by finally becoming the partner you deserved instead of the dependent you created." The conversation ended with Miranda in tears, but not tears of remorse. Tears of someone whose carefully constructed worldview was collapsing around her. 6 months later, I was promoted to Senior Systems Architect for the European Division, with the flexibility to work remotely from anywhere in the EU. My Dublin apartment had become home in ways that our suburban house never had, a space reflecting my choices, my preferences, my actual capabilities. I'd learned to cook traditional Irish dishes, developed friendships with people who appreciated my humor and intelligence, and dated briefly with a woman who treated me as an equal rather than a project requiring improvement. Miranda and I divorced quietly, with minimal drama once the financial realities became clear. She'd moved in with her parents after being unable to manage the mortgage on her solo income, and her friends had grown tired of hearing about my abandonment of family responsibilities. The house sold within 2 months. After splitting the proceeds, Miranda had enough for a fresh start, and I had enough to establish permanent residency wherever I chose to build my life. On my last day of official Dublin employment before transitioning to permanent remote work, my manager took me out for congratulations drinks. "Remarkable success story," she said, raising her glass. "Not everyone adapts to international independence as smoothly as you have. You must have had excellent preparation for living autonomously." I thought about Miranda's dinner party, about her casual confidence that I was helpless without her management, about the months of discovering exactly how capable I'd always been. "Actually," I said, "I had excellent motivation to learn what I was actually capable of accomplishing." 2 years later, I'm writing this from a cottage in County Cork where I've established my permanent base. The work remains challenging and rewarding. My social life includes people who value my judgment and companionship, and every day reinforces the difference between being loved and being managed. Miranda reached out recently through mutual friends, suggesting we try again now that we've both grown from our experiences. According to these friends, she's learned to live more independently and thinks we could build a more balanced relationship. But balance isn't possible between someone who respects your competence and someone who's learned to tolerate it. Balance requires two people who start from a foundation of mutual respect, not one person convincing the other that basic adult capabilities are impressive improvements. She taught me something invaluable about the difference between partnership and parenthood. Partners trust each other's judgment and capabilities. Parents make decisions for children who can't be trusted with adult responsibilities. I spent 3 years being her dependent instead of her equal, accepting her management instead of demanding her respect. The child she created finally learned to fly and discovered that the sky was infinitely larger than the cage he'd been convinced was protection. Some people are natural caregivers, as Miranda told her friends that night. But caregiving in a marriage should be mutual support between equals, not one adult managing another adult's life because they've decided that adult is fundamentally incompetent. The most important lesson wasn't about financial independence or international living or professional success. It was about the difference between someone who loves who you are and someone who loves who they've convinced you that you need them to be. I never needed her management. I needed her respect. And once I understood that distinction, everything else became remarkably simple to navigate on my own.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.